r/ProRevenge, MIL demanded I sign prenup. I exposed her bankruptcy lies. Hashtag chunk 1, the prenup bomb. I stared at the stack of documents on my kitchen table, my hands trembling so badly I had to sit down. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on were the words printed in black and white, words that fundamentally changed everything I thought I knew about my fiancé's family. 3 weeks earlier, everything had felt perfect. Marcus had proposed on a Saturday morning with his grandmother's diamond ring, and I'd said yes before he even finished asking the question. We were both 28, stable in our careers, and genuinely in love. I worked as a marketing manager for a tech company. He was an architect. We'd met at a friend's wedding 2 years ago and had been inseparable ever since. I'd been ready to spend the rest of my life with him. Then his mother, Victoria, had called. Darling, she'd said in that practiced, saccharine tone she used whenever she wanted something, we need to discuss the prenup. Family matters, you understand. I didn't understand. Not at first. My parents had a modest middle-class background. My dad was a high school teacher, my mom worked in nursing. Neither of them had significant wealth or assets beyond our childhood home, which was still being paid off. The idea that anyone would need a prenup seemed excessive, but Marcus had seemed anxious about it, so I'd agreed to at least listen to what his family's lawyer had to say. That was my first mistake. The lawyer, a thin man with expensive glasses and an expensive suit, had made it very clear the family had significant assets to protect. Multiple properties. Investment portfolios. Business interests. The prenup was standard practice for families of their means, he'd explained, making me feel like a gold digger with every carefully chosen word. I wasn't a gold digger. I'd never cared about Marcus's money. His parents' money, even less so. But sitting across from that lawyer, seeing how the conversation was framed, I'd felt my cheeks burn with shame. The implication was clear, they thought I was after their wealth. Marcus had squeezed my hand under the table, and I could tell he was uncomfortable too, but he hadn't stood up for me. That had hurt, though I'd tried to understand. Family dynamics were complicated, and Victoria had always been a strong presence in his life. The real turning point came when the lawyer had asked me to provide financial documents, my bank statements, investment accounts, all of it. He wanted to see everything I owned, everything I owed, everything I was worth. That's when Marcus's friend Derek had texted him. Derek worked in financial services, and when Marcus mentioned the prenup situation, Derek had casually asked which lawyer Victoria had hired. When Marcus told him, Derek had paused and then said something that made Marcus's stomach drop. That guy specializes in asset protection cases. Usually for people hiding money or trying to shield themselves from creditors. It was meant as a joke. Neither of them had meant it seriously. But Marcus had repeated it to me later that night, and something about it had nagged at me. Why would a family with significant assets need that particular lawyer? I dismissed the thought, told myself I was being paranoid. Then I'd found the documents. I hadn't been snooping. I swear I hadn't. Marcus and I had been moving some boxes around his apartment, consolidating things before the wedding since I was selling my place and moving into the larger condo he bought near his office. One of the boxes had contained old financial files, things he'd apparently never organized, and as I was sorting through to see what could be donated, a folder had tumbled out. It was labeled, Mom's financial stuff, don't touch. I should have left it alone. I absolutely should have left it alone. Instead, I'd opened it. What I found inside made my blood run cold. Bankruptcy filing documents. From 2 years ago. Victoria's name was on them. The debts listed were staggering, nearly $3 million in personal loans, credit card debt, failed business ventures, and property liens. There were letters from creditors. There were notices of foreclosure on a property in the Hamptons that I'd never even heard about. And there was a letter from a forensic accountant hired by her creditors, questioning how Victoria's son, Marcus, had been able to purchase his condo and fund his architecture firm's startup costs when the family supposedly had no liquid assets. My hands had gone numb. The condo Marcus owned. The one he told me he'd bought with his own money from his savings and a modest mortgage. The one his mother had congratulated him on so publicly. That condo had apparently been purchased with funds that were still technically part of her bankruptcy estate. There were questions about whether it was fraudulently transferred. I'd sat down on the floor of his apartment and read through the entire stack of documents 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood something. Hoping there was some innocent explanation. There wasn't. Victoria wasn't a woman protecting family assets. She was a woman in massive debt, demanding I sign a prenup to protect assets she didn't have, while the actual family money, what little liquid assets existed, was tied up in trying to hide what she'd done from creditors. And Marcus didn't know. That was the part that kept hitting me like a physical blow. He had no idea his mother had filed for bankruptcy. No idea she'd hidden this from him. No idea that the lawyer she'd hired was helping her protect the appearance of wealth while she was actually drowning in debt. Now I was sitting at my kitchen table with a copy of everything, and the engagement party was in 5 days. 5 days until I was going to have to decide what to do with this information. I picked up my phone and looked at the engagement party details for the 100th time. It was going to be at their country club. Both families. About 100 people. Victoria had spent a fortune on it, or rather, on the appearance of spending a fortune, which meant she'd probably put it on credit she didn't have. The prenup signing was scheduled for the day after the party. I took a shaky breath and stared at my reflection in my dark phone screen. Whatever happened next was going to change everything. Hashtag chunk 2, the weight of secrets. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next 3 nights, if I'm being honest. I told Marcus I wasn't feeling well, a stomach bug, nothing serious, and he'd been sympathetic enough, bringing me ginger tea and leaving me alone to rest. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, lying in bed next to my fiancé, knowing something massive about his family that he didn't know about himself, and he was being sweet and considerate while I felt like I was slowly drowning. The documents stayed hidden in a folder in my office at work. I'd taken photos of everything on my phone, encrypted them, and stored them in a password-protected cloud account that only I could access. Part of me was terrified that Marcus would find them and think I'd been deliberately snooping. Part of me was furious that I'd discovered something so important by accident and now felt responsible for it. By Wednesday, 2 days before the engagement party, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I called my best friend Sarah. I need to see you, I said without preamble. In person. Not at work. Somewhere private. Sarah knew me well enough not to ask questions over the phone. We met at a small coffee shop across town that neither of us frequented, and I spent 40 minutes laying out everything I'd found. I watched her face go through every emotion, shock, concern, anger, and finally, a kind of helpless understanding. Oh my God, she kept saying. Oh my God, that's insane. I know. Does Marcus really not know? I don't think so. I've watched him very carefully over the last few days, and there's no way he's hiding this. He'd be a better actor than he is an architect if he could pull that off. Sarah stirred her coffee for a long time without drinking it. What are you going to do? I have no idea. And that was the truth. I'd spent 72 hours running through scenarios in my head, and none of them ended well. Option 1, tell Marcus privately before the party. He'd have time to process, to figure out how to handle his mother, but he'd also have to live with the knowledge that his mother had been lying to him, possibly about his own financial situation, for 2 years. He might blame me for finding the documents, even though I hadn't been intentionally snooping. He might feel obligated to protect his mother's secret, which would put me in an impossible position. Or worse, he might tell his mother that I'd found out, and Victoria would have time to construct some narrative before the party. Option 2, tell him at the party, in front of everyone. That was the revenge fantasy version, the one that played out in my head in vivid detail. The public humiliation of Victoria, the gasps from guests, the clarity that would come with the truth being exposed. But it would also be cruel, humiliating to Marcus in front of his extended family and family friends, and would definitely make him resent me, regardless of whether it was the right thing to do. Option 3, don't tell anyone. Sign the prenup. Marry Marcus. Let him discover the truth on his own timeline. But how could I do that? How could I walk down the aisle knowing I'd kept this from him? How could I sign a legal document that was based entirely on a lie? Every time Victoria mentioned protecting family assets, I'd know she was protecting nothing but a facade. Option 4, call off the engagement and disappear. Just leave. No explanation, no drama, no exposure. Let Marcus figure out his family's mess without me in the picture. That one made me want to cry every time I thought about it. The prenup signing is tomorrow, Sarah said quietly. After the party. I know. And the party is tomorrow night. I know that too. So you have, what, maybe 24 hours to figure out what you're going to do? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Sarah reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Listen to me. You love Marcus, right? Actually love him? Yes. And he loves you? Like, genuinely? I think so. I hope so. Then you have to tell him. Not at the party. Tonight. You go home, you sit him down, and you tell him everything. You show him the documents. You explain that you found them by accident, and you were as shocked as he's going to be. You give him the chance to process this and figure out what he wants to do about his mother, but you don't do it in front of 100 people. It was what I'd been thinking all along, but hearing Sarah say it made it feel both more possible and more terrifying. What if he hates me? He won't. You don't know that. I know that anyone worth marrying wouldn't hate you for telling them the truth about their family finances, Sarah said firmly. If he hates you for that, then you've learned something important about who he is before you legally bind yourself to him. Either way, you'll know. I picked at the edge of my coffee cup, thinking about Marcus's face when he talked about his mother. About the way he deferred to her opinions, sought her approval on decisions, tolerated her intrusions into our relationship. He'd never stood up to her, not really. Not when it mattered. But maybe that was because he didn't know what she'd done. That evening, I told Marcus I was feeling better and suggested we order in dinner. Nothing fancy, nothing suspicious. Just a quiet night at home. He seemed pleased, relieved that I was recovering, and ordered from my favorite Thai place. We were halfway through dinner when I said, Marcus, I need to talk to you about something serious. He set his fork down immediately, concern flooding his face. Are you okay? Are you sick? I'm fine. But something happened, and I need to tell you about it. I watched his expression shift as I explained finding the documents. I saw the moment when realization hit him, then confusion, then something that looked like anger. But not directed at me, it was directed inward, at his own family, at the deception. I don't understand, he said quietly. How is that possible? If she filed for bankruptcy, where did our money come from? How did he stopped, and his face went pale. The condo. The documents suggest. She paid for it. I remember now. She said she had some money from selling a property, and she wanted to invest in my future. I thought. He pressed his hands against his eyes. I thought she was being generous. The pain in his voice was almost unbearable. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. No. He dropped his hands and looked at me directly. No, this isn't your fault. This is her fault. You did the right thing telling me. But his voice was hollow, and I could see the moment he understood the full scope of what his mother had done, and what it meant about her, about his family, about the life he thought he had. The engagement party was in 18 hours. And everything was about to change. #chunk3. Marcus didn't sleep that night. I know because I didn't sleep either, and I was hyper-aware of every time he shifted position, every time he got out of bed to pace the hallway or sit in the dark living room. Around 3 a.m., I found him on the couch, his phone in his hand, staring at nothing. Have you called her? I asked quietly. No. His voice was rough. I don't even know what I'd say. Hey Mom, I know you've been lying to me about our family's finances for years. How do you even start that conversation? I sat down next to him, careful not to touch him yet. You could just ask her directly. Show her the documents. And have her deny it? Blame it on a mix-up, or some accounting error, or claim you misunderstood what you were looking at. He turned to look at me, and the betrayal in his eyes was so raw it made my chest hurt. She's going to lie, isn't she? Even if I confront her with proof, she's going to find some way to make it not be what it obviously is. I didn't answer because we both knew he was right. This was Victoria we were talking about, a woman who'd been competent enough to demand a prenup while hiding bankruptcy filings. The party is tonight, Marcus said, more to himself than to me. Everyone's going to be there. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins. Family friends. People from my firm. We could cancel it, I offered, though I already knew that wouldn't happen. No. He shook his head firmly. No, that would raise too many questions, and she'd spin it into something about us. About you. She's probably already planning to tell people that you're being difficult, that you're trying to isolate me from my family or some shit like that. Marcus. I'm sorry. He finally reached over and took my hand. I'm not angry at you. I want to be very clear about that. But I'm so angry at her, and I'm angry at myself for being so blind, and I'm drowning. I squeezed his hand. What do you want to do? He was quiet for a long time. I think I need to talk to my dad before the party. And my uncle, my mom's brother. He might know something about the bankruptcy. He might know that she's been lying. Do you think he does? I don't know. But I can't go into that party tonight and pretend everything is fine. I can't shake her hand and smile and let her make a speech about the importance of family loyalty while she's been betraying all of us. By 7 a.m., Marcus had called his father. I listened from the kitchen as he explained, in careful, measured tones, what he'd found out. I couldn't hear his dad's responses, but I could see Marcus's face getting darker, angrier, more hurt with each passing minute. When he hung up, he looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. He knew, Marcus said flatly. Dad knew about the bankruptcy. She made him sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, so he couldn't tell anyone, even his own son. He's been covering for her for 3 years. I felt my stomach drop. What? He said he didn't want to be the one to tell me. He wanted her to tell me herself. He thought eventually she would. Marcus laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. He thought she'd come clean before we got married. Before I found out accidentally by looking through documents in her office. That's insane? Yeah. He stood up abruptly and started pacing. He's not even coming to the party. He said he couldn't face people while living this lie. He's going to his brother's house instead. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria, asterisk so excited for tonight, sweetheart. What time will you be ready? I'm thinking we should do a champagne toast before the party officially starts, asterisk. I showed Marcus the message without comment. She has no idea, he said quietly. She thinks she's gotten away with it. She thinks the prenup will protect everything, and we'll just go along with her lies forever. Maybe your uncle can help, I suggested. Maybe he knows more. I'm going to call him next. But Marcus didn't move. He just stood there, holding the phone, staring at it like it was a bomb. What if he doesn't answer? What if he knew too and didn't tell me? What if they've all been in on it? You can't think like that. You'll drive yourself crazy. I'm already crazy. He finally looked at me. I'm about to publicly expose my mother at an engagement party celebrating my engagement to you. Do you understand what that's going to do to you? To us? People are going to ask questions. They're going to wonder if you orchestrated this somehow, if you're trying to sabotage my relationship with my family. I don't care what people think. You should care. I care. I don't want them blaming you for this. Then we won't expose her, I said. It came out before I'd even fully thought it through. We could just not do it. Not tonight. Marcus studied me for a long moment. Is that what you want? No, I admitted. But I don't want to hurt you either. And I'm terrified that tonight is going to blow up in all our faces. It probably will, he said quietly. But at least it will be the truth. His uncle called him back 40 minutes later. I watched Marcus's face as he listened, watched him press his free hand against his forehead like he was trying to keep his skull from splitting open. When he hung up, he looked at me. Uncle David says she's been lying to everyone for years. He found out by accident 6 months ago when he was reviewing some family trust documents. He tried to talk to her about it, and she told him it was none of his business, and if he mentioned it to anyone, she'd make sure everyone knew about his gambling problem from 15 years ago. She blackmailed him? She blackmailed her own brother to keep her lie quiet. Marcus sat back down on the couch like his legs had given out. And my dad, apparently, she's been threatening to divorce him if he told anyone. Said she'd take the condo, the one she got with money from a bankruptcy she was hiding, and leave him with nothing. The room felt like it was getting smaller, the walls closing in. The prenup signing is in 16 hours, I whispered. I know. And the party is in, I checked my phone, 11 hours. I know. Marcus, what are we going to do? He looked at me, and for the first time since he'd found out the truth, I saw something crystallize in his expression. A kind of grim determination mixed with desperation. We're going to that party, he said. And we're going to do what's right, no matter what it costs us. I wanted to ask him what he meant by that, but something in his tone told me I already knew. And I wasn't sure I was ready to face what came next. #chunk 4. The next 3 hours were a blur of preparation and panic. I showered while Marcus sat on the bathroom counter, ostensibly getting ready himself but mostly staring at the tile wall like it held the answers to his problems. He'd changed clothes 3 times, casual button-up, then a blazer, then back to casual, as if the right outfit could somehow armor him against what was coming. I wanted to tell him that nothing could do that. That tonight would hurt regardless of what he wore. By 10 a.m., my mother called. She'd been calling every few hours since I'd texted her that morning with vague language about family stuff coming up and we need to talk later. Honey, what's going on? She asked immediately. You're scaring me. Is everything okay with Marcus? Are you calling off the wedding? No, Mom, it's not that. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching Marcus pace the hallway through the open door. It's just, there are some things about his family that we've discovered. Things that are going to come out today, and I wanted to give you a heads up before it becomes a whole thing. What kind of things? I couldn't explain it all over the phone. The lies, the bankruptcy, the blackmail, the NDA. Instead, I told her to come to the party early, before the official start time, so Marcus and I could brief her and his dad could explain his absence before Victoria started spinning her narrative. My mother, bless her, didn't ask 100 questions. She just said, "I'll be there at 5 p.m. and hung up. Around 11 a.m., there was a knock at the door. For a second, my heart stopped. Had Victoria decided to come by early? But it was Marcus's Uncle David, a tall man in his 60s with kind eyes that looked exhausted. "I came to see my nephew," he said quietly when Marcus opened the door. "Before tonight. Before everything falls apart." They talked in the living room for an hour while I pretended not to eavesdrop from the bedroom, though I caught fragments. Words like "your mother is not well," and "she's been under a lot of pressure," and "I've tried to reach her, but she won't listen to reason." And then Marcus's voice, harder than I'd ever heard it: "She made you complicit in lying to my father. To me. She blackmailed you. That's not pressure, Uncle David. That's cruelty." When David left, he hugged Marcus for what felt like 5 minutes. Marcus stood there, stiff as a board, not returning the embrace until the very end. I could see the conflict on his face. This was still his uncle, still family, but family had become complicated in ways that couldn't be untangled with a simple hug. By noon, I was trying on dresses in a state of near delirium. Nothing felt right. Too fancy felt like I was celebrating something terrible. Too casual felt like I was being flippant about the destruction we were about to cause. I settled on a navy dress that was elegant but not extravagant, the kind of thing you'd wear to any engagement party, not the kind you'd wear to a family apocalypse. Marcus's phone rang at 12:45 p.m. "Victoria." I watched him from the doorway as he stared at the caller ID, his jaw clenching. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. But he did. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice perfectly normal. I had no idea how he was doing that. "Yeah, we're on track for tonight." "No, I was asleep." "Long night." "The prenup?" "We're." "Actually, I need to talk to you about that before the party." "No, not over the phone. We'll talk when we get there." "Okay. See you soon." He hung up and immediately went to the bathroom and threw up. I held his hair back and rubbed circles on his back, and he kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," over and over like he was the one who'd done something wrong. By 2 p.m., I'd texted with my mother, my best friend, who I'd sworn to secrecy, and then, after a long internal debate, I'd called the prenup lawyer and told him that there was new information that would be relevant to the discussion and that we'd need to postpone the signing. He'd asked questions. I deflected. He seemed to understand that something was wrong, and he didn't push. My mother arrived at 4:30 p.m., and when I opened the door, she took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug without saying anything. Then she went directly to Marcus and did the same thing. He broke a little bit in her arms, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom because watching him cry was making me lose my composure entirely. When I came back out, my mom and Marcus were sitting at the kitchen table, and she was holding his hands across it. "We're going to get through this," she was saying. "You're doing the right thing, even though it doesn't feel like it. The right thing rarely does." "What if he hates me afterward?" Marcus asked. "What if my family decides I'm the villain in this story?" "Then you'll know who your real family is," my mother said simply. At 5:15 p.m., Marcus's father arrived, not to go to the party, but to see Marcus before he did. He looked like he'd aged a decade. There was a hollow quality to him that I'd never noticed before, and I realized that for 3 years, he'd been carrying this weight alone, bound by silence and threats. Marcus and his father hugged in the hallway, and I heard his dad say, "I should have told you. I was a coward, and I'm sorry." "I know," Marcus replied, and there was sadness in those 2 words that broke my heart. By 6 p.m., we were all dressed. My mother was wearing her "I'm here to support my daughter but I'm also not taking any shit" outfit. Marcus looked pale but resolved. I felt like I might throw up, pass out, or both simultaneously. 1 hour, I said, checking my phone. "We leave in 1 hour." 1 hour, Marcus repeated, like it was a death sentence. The doorbell rang at 6:15 p.m. My stomach dropped. Nobody was supposed to come until the party officially started at 7 p.m. Marcus went to the door, and I heard a familiar voice, his mother's voice, bright and cheerful and completely oblivious to the bomb about to explode in her face. "Marcus. Darling, I know I'm early, but I need to talk to you about something before the party starts. Something important about the prenup and, oh my god, is that your father's car in the driveway? Why is your father here? He told me he was going to his brother's house." And then she appeared in the doorway, perfectly put together, wearing a designer dress and a smile that hadn't yet registered that the world was about to change. "Well," she said, her eyes sweeping across all of us, my mother, my father, Marcus, and me, "isn't this a surprise?" The way she said it, you'd think she had no idea what was coming. But I could see her eyes calculating, reassessing, preparing her defenses. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how wrong yet. #Chunk5. "Well," she said, her eyes sweeping across all of us, my mother, my father, Marcus, and me, "isn't this a surprise?" The way she said it, you'd think she had no idea what was coming. But I could see her eyes calculating, reassessing, preparing her defenses. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know how wrong yet. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice steady in a way that surprised me. "We need to talk." "Of course, sweetheart. That's why I'm here." Victoria stepped fully into the hallway, still maintaining that perfect composure, though her eyes had gone sharp. She glanced at my mother, taking in her expression, then at Marcus's father, whose presence clearly rattled her. "Though this seems like it should be a private conversation between us." "No," Marcus said flatly. "It shouldn't be." I watched Victoria's jaw tighten, just slightly. Her hand went to her neck, a tell, I was learning. When she was nervous, she touched her neck. "Well, this is awkward," she said with a forced laugh. "Perhaps we should move this to the living room? Away from the doorway? The neighbors might." "The neighbors can hear what they want," Marcus cut her off. "Actually, I think everyone should hear this." "Marcus." My mother placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Maybe we should sit down first." Victoria's eyes shifted to me, and I saw the calculation shift again. Her expression hardened just a fraction. "You," she said, her voice dropping into something colder. "You put him up to this." "No one put me up to anything, Mom," Marcus said, but Victoria was already shaking her head, her smile turning brittle. "I knew it," she said, almost to herself. I knew the moment you started asking questions about the prenup that you were digging. You couldn't just accept that we needed to protect. Protect what? Marcus's voice cracked slightly. A fortune that doesn't exist? A reputation built on lies? The color drained from Victoria's face. It happened so quickly that I thought she might actually faint, and I instinctively moved closer, my hand out. But she steadied herself against the wall, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the paint. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. The bankruptcy filing, I said quietly. From 3 years ago. The debts. The NDA you had Dad sign. The blackmail. Victoria's eyes snapped to Marcus's father, and I saw something pass between them, a history of this exact moment, perhaps. A moment he'd been dreading for years. You told her? Victoria's voice rose, sharp as a blade. You told her about your financial troubles? Our private family matters? I didn't tell anyone, Marcus's father said tiredly. She found the documents. She found, Victoria's hands curled into fists. She had no right to. I had every right, I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You demanded I sign a prenup claiming your family had significant assets to protect. You made me feel like a gold digger for questioning it. You lied to your son, to your husband, to me. I had every right to verify what you were claiming. Victoria's face had gone white, then mottled with red. She looked like a completely different person than the polished woman who'd arrived at my apartment weeks ago. You don't understand family dynamics, she hissed. You don't understand what it takes to maintain certain standards, certain appearances. I understand that you blackmailed Dad, Marcus said, his voice shaking with anger now. I understand that you've known about Uncle David's involvement and never said a word to him about it. I understand that you're willing to let me marry someone you've convinced me is a gold digger just so you can control the narrative around your financial situation. That is not what this is about, Victoria snapped. Then what is it about? Marcus demanded. Explain it to me, Mom. Explain how any of this is okay. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. For a moment, I thought she might actually try to justify it. But then her expression shifted again, this time to something almost calculating. She straightened her dress with shaking hands. You're upset, she said, using the tone you'd use on a child having a tantrum. You're not thinking clearly. Once you've had time to process, you'll understand that I was trying to protect this family. Protect you. By lying to me? Marcus's voice cracked. By blackmailing Dad? By manipulating me into thinking my fiancé was only interested in money? I was protecting you from making a mistake, Victoria said coldly. From rushing into marriage with someone you barely know. Is that really so terrible? Is that really worth destroying your family over? The words hung in the air like poison. My mother stepped forward slightly, and I felt a surge of gratitude toward her. The destroying part, she said quietly but firmly, is all on you, Victoria. Everything your son is feeling right now, everything that happens next, that's you. Not him. Victoria rounded on her. I don't recall asking for your input. You're not getting it as input, my mother replied. You're getting it as a courtesy. I'm being civil. I'd recommend you consider doing the same. Marcus's father, who had been silent throughout this entire exchange, finally spoke. Victoria, you need to stop talking. Right now. We can figure this out, but not like this. Not with, he glanced toward the living room where I could see the shadows of other family members beginning to arrive for the party, people hearing you. Victoria's eyes darted toward the living room, and I watched her do the mental calculation. How many people had arrived? Who had heard what? What could she still salvage? I think, she said slowly, her voice dropping back into that controlled, perfect tone, that we should all take a step back and think about what we're doing here. I have thought about it, Marcus said. For the last 18 hours, I've thought about nothing else. And? Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, a predator assessing whether its prey was actually cornered or if there was still an exit. And I want to know everything, Marcus said. Before the party starts. Before we face anyone else. I want to know the whole truth, and I want to know it from you. Victoria smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. Oh, sweetheart, she said. I think you've already made up your mind about what the truth is. The doorbell rang again, more guests arriving, and Victoria turned toward the sound like a magnet had switched on inside her chest. Shall we, she said, gesturing toward the living room with a gesture that was almost graceful. Your guests are arriving. #chunk 6. Marcus didn't move. Neither did I. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time, and I could hear muffled voices from the living room, people greeting each other, the clink of glasses, the forced cheerfulness of social obligation. No, Marcus said quietly. We're not doing this. Victoria's hand was already on the doorframe, her body angled toward the party like she could simply walk away from this moment and pretend it never happened. Marcus, we can discuss this later. In private. When we're not being so emotional? My father's voice cut through the air. He'd been so quiet I'd almost forgotten he was there. When you're not getting caught? Victoria's eyes flashed, and she turned to face my father directly. I don't know you well enough to engage with whatever this is, she said icily. Lucky for you, my father replied, because I'm not looking to engage. I'm looking to understand why a woman would blackmail her own husband and manipulate her son. But I'm guessing we won't get a straight answer. The truth, Victoria said slowly, is complicated. And it's not anyone's business but ours. It became my business when you demanded I sign a prenup based on lies, I said. My voice was steadier now, even though my heart was hammering. It became everyone's business when you started blackmailing people to keep your secrets. Marcus's father cleared his throat. Victoria, I think we should. Should what, Richard? She whirled on him with a viciousness that made me step back. Should tuck tail and run? Should let everyone in this house tear apart everything I've worked for? Should let this girl, she pointed at me, this stranger decide what our family secrets are? She didn't decide, Marcus said. You did. When you decided to lie. The doorbell rang a third time, and now I could hear actual knocking. Someone was getting impatient. The party was in full swing now. I could hear what sounded like at least 20 people in the living room, the ambient noise of a family gathering in progress. Victoria's expression shifted again, becoming almost calculating in a new way. I watched her make a decision. You know what, she said, her voice dropping into something almost pleasant. You're right. We should discuss this later. In private. But right now, we have guests. Family and friends who've come to celebrate you too. We're not celebrating, Marcus said flatly. No? And what exactly do you plan to tell them? Victoria's smile was sharp as broken glass. That your mother blackmailed your father? That your fiancé invaded our privacy and went through our documents? That your whole family is a lie? The words hit like a physical blow. Not because they were true, they weren't, not entirely, but because I suddenly understood what she was doing. She was reframing the narrative. She was turning this into a he said she said situation, and she was about to make us the villains of the story. I found documents that were relevant to a prenup you demanded I sign, I said carefully. I didn't invade anything. They were in a folder I was specifically asked to review. Victoria's laugh was brittle. A folder your fiancé's mother was conveniently asked to review? By whom, exactly? My mother stepped forward. By me. I asked her to review them because I'm her mother and I wanted to make sure she wasn't being taken advantage of. If that makes me a villain in your story, I can live with it. How noble, Victoria said. Marcus's phone buzzed. Then again. And again. I watched his face as he glanced at it, watched his jaw clench. What is it? His father asked. It's David, Marcus said quietly. He says someone's been texting family members. Someone's been telling them about the bankruptcy. The color drained from Victoria's face completely. This time, when she reached out to steady herself, she actually seemed to need it. What? Who would? You, I said, and suddenly I understood. You did. You've been texting people. Preemptively. Making your version of the story the first one they hear. That's insane, Victoria said, but her voice had lost all conviction. Is it? I pulled out my own phone and scrolled through the group chat that had apparently exploded in the last few minutes. There it was, a message from Victoria's number, sent 15 minutes ago while we were in the hallway. A carefully worded explanation about family financial difficulties that were being handled privately, about how she was shocked and disappointed that private matters were being weaponized by people outside the family, about how she hoped everyone would understand the delicate situation and the need for discretion. It was brilliant, actually. Horrible, but brilliant. She'd gotten ahead of the story. By the time anyone asked real questions, the narrative would already be set. She wasn't the villain, she was the victim of a betrayal. You've been in contact with them this whole time, my mother said, understanding exactly what I was understanding. You didn't show up here unprepared at all. Victoria didn't deny it. Instead, she straightened her dress and met our eyes one by one. I did what any mother would do, she said quietly. I protected my family. I made sure that my version of events was heard first, because I knew that if I didn't, she gestured vaguely at all of us, this circus would destroy everything. Your version of events is a lie, Marcus said. My version of events is survival, Victoria corrected. She moved toward the doorway again, but this time with purpose. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have guests to attend to. I suggest you decide very quickly what story you want to tell when you walk into that room, because they've already heard mine. The door to the living room was open now. I could see faces turning toward us, curious. Could hear the moment the ambient noise shifted, that curious, alert silence that means everyone's suddenly paying attention to the room's drama rather than their own conversations. Mom, Marcus started, but Victoria was already moving, already putting on her smile. Come along, she said over her shoulder. Let's put on a show for our guests, shall we? I'm sure they're all dying to meet the fiancé who tried to ruin her future mother-in-law. #Chunk7. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching Victoria glide into the living room like she owned the space, like she had owned it before the moment she decided to risk everything on a gamble. The conversation died almost immediately. I could see it happen, like a wave of silence spreading outward from where we stood. Heads turned. Eyes locked onto our group. Someone actually set down their drink. Marcus grabbed my hand. His palm was sweating. We need to go in there, he said quietly. We need to control this. She's already controlling it, my father said grimly. He was staring at Victoria, who was now making her way through the room, hugging people, kissing cheeks, playing the gracious hostess with a kind of practiced ease that made my stomach turn. Look at her. She's been planning this moment since she found out we were here. My mother was still holding her phone, scrolling through the group chat. Her face had gone pale. Oh my God, she whispered. She sent a follow-up message. She's telling them that we showed up unannounced to ambush her with financial accusations. She's saying she looked at me, that you went through her private documents without permission and are trying to use them as leverage in a custody dispute over her husband. What? I felt something cold slide down my spine. That's insane. We don't have a custody dispute. Her husband isn't. It doesn't matter if it's true, Marcus's father said quietly. He looked older suddenly, like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. What matters is that she said it. What matters is that 40 people just read that message and are now looking at us like we're the problem. I could see it happening in real time. The way people's expressions shifted. The way conversations that had been animated suddenly became hushed. The way some of them, the ones who clearly believed Victoria's narrative first, were now looking at me with suspicion. Judgment. I was no longer the bride-to-be at her engagement party. I was the girl who'd supposedly betrayed the family. Marcus squeezed my hand harder. Fuck this, he said, and started walking into the room. I tried to hold him back. Wait. No. His voice was cold, steady, absolutely certain. I'm done waiting. I'm done letting her control the narrative. He pulled me forward, and we moved into the living room together. The noise level didn't return to normal. If anything, it got quieter. More tense. I recognized some of the faces. His aunt from Boston. His cousins. Some family friends I'd met at smaller gatherings. And then there were the people I didn't know, and those were the ones who scared me most, because they had no context, no reason to believe anything other than what Victoria had just told them. For the record, Marcus announced, his voice carrying across the room in a way that seemed to surprise everyone, including me. None of what my mother just told you is accurate. Victoria turned from where she was standing with a group of cousins, her smile never faltering. Oh, Marcus. You're upset. Which is understandable, given the shock of all this. But we don't need to air family business in front of. That's exactly what we need to do, Marcus said. Because you've been airing it for the last 20 minutes, just with your version of the story. And I'm not interested in letting you have the last word. This isn't the time or place, Victoria started, but Marcus cut her off. It's never the time or place when you want to keep lying. He turned to face the room fully, keeping my hand firmly in his. My mother is a liar. She's been lying to this family for years. About our wealth. About our financial status. About a bankruptcy she filed 3 years ago that she told my father was still being handled quietly and that we should never mention. The room had gone completely silent now. I could hear someone shifting their weight across the room. Could hear the ice in someone's drink. Victoria's smile had finally cracked. It was still there, but it looked brittle now, held in place by sheer force of will. Marcus, you're confused. You're listening to people who don't understand the full situation. I understand the situation perfectly, Marcus said. I understand that you demanded my fiancé sign a prenup based on assets that don't exist. I understand that you've been manipulating this family, and specifically my father, for years to keep him quiet about your financial situation. And I understand that when you got caught, your first instinct was to smear the people who exposed you instead of just admitting the truth. And what truth is that? Victoria's voice had gone very quiet. It was somehow more frightening than her previous composure. That you're human, Marcus said, and I felt something shift in his tone. Something almost sad. That you made mistakes. That you got scared and made bad decisions. That instead of asking for help, you lied. But instead of just accepting that and dealing with the consequences, you're trying to convince everyone that your lies are actually our fault. His aunt, the one from Boston, raised her hand. Marcus, we need to see some actual evidence before we start. I have copies of the bankruptcy filing, I heard myself say. The room turned to look at me. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I had the documents from her financial disclosures. I have the text messages where she pressured her husband to keep quiet about their actual financial situation. I have everything. How did you get those? Someone asked. I thought it might be his uncle, but I couldn't be sure anymore. The room felt like it was tilting slightly. They were given to me willingly, I said. By my fiancé's father, because he wanted someone outside this family dynamic to understand what was actually happening. Marcus's father stepped forward. His face was drawn, but there was something resolute in his expression. It's true, he said quietly. I gave her those documents. Because I was tired of lying. Because I couldn't keep pretending anymore that everything was fine when it wasn't. Victoria made a small noise, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. When I looked at her, I realized that for the first time since we'd arrived, she looked genuinely frightened. Not the calculated fear of someone whose lies were being exposed, but the real fear of someone who'd just realized that her entire house of cards had collapsed and she couldn't rebuild it fast enough to stop the fall. You don't understand, she said, and her voice was shaking now. You don't understand what it's like to fail. To have everything you worked for just disappear. To have to face people and pretend that you still have it all together. Then you should have just said that, Marcus said quietly. Instead of making everyone else lie with you. And in that moment, watching Victoria's face crumble, watching the room shift around us as people began whispering, began reassessing, began believing the truth instead of the story, I realized that we'd won. But the victory felt hollow. Because we'd won by destroying her. And I wasn't sure that made us any better than she was. #Chunk 8, the aftermath. The engagement party dissolved like sugar in water after that. People gathered their things, made awkward excuses, avoided eye contact. Some stopped to squeeze Marcus's shoulder on their way out. Others deliberately avoided looking at Victoria, who had retreated to a corner chair and sat there, perfectly still, as if complete stillness might make her invisible. I watched my mother help coordinate the cleanup with Marcus's aunts, the ones who decided, after hearing the actual facts, that family loyalty meant supporting the truth rather than protecting lies. My father was in Marcus's father's study with him and Marcus's older brother James, who'd arrived halfway through the chaos and spent the last 20 minutes making phone calls to other family members, spreading context, tamping down the gossip before it could spiral further. Marcus and I stood on the back patio, away from everyone. The night air was cool, and I was shaking slightly, the adrenaline crash hitting all at once. He had his arm around my shoulders, his chin resting against my hair. That wasn't how I imagined this going, I said quietly. I know, he replied. But it's how it needed to go. Inside, I could see Victoria through the glass doors. She hadn't moved. She was just sitting there, staring at nothing, and I felt that hollow victory settle deeper into my chest. We'd exposed her. We'd won. But the cost of that victory was a woman I'd have to see at holidays, at family events, for potentially the rest of my life, a woman whose shame and humiliation was now witnessed by dozens of people and would probably spread through the entire extended family network within days. Do you regret it? I asked him. Coming in like that. Forcing the confrontation. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. But I'm not happy about it either. Is that possible? Can you feel both things at the same time? I think that's the only honest answer, I said. The next few weeks were strange. The story spread, mutated, evolved through the family like any good scandal does. By the time it reached his cousins in California, apparently it involved yachts and offshore accounts. By the time it reached his uncle in Texas, Victoria had somehow become a gambling addict. We didn't correct any of these versions. We didn't need to. The truth, that Victoria had hidden a bankruptcy, lied about the family's financial status, and manipulated everyone around her, was damaging enough. What surprised me was how people actually responded when given the choice. Marcus's aunt from Boston sent a handwritten letter apologizing for initially doubting us. She included a check for a portion of what she'd apparently loaned Victoria over the years, having realized those loans were likely never going to be repaid. His cousins reached out, asking questions, sharing their own stories of times Victoria's financial claims hadn't quite added up. His father, freed from the burden of lying, seemed to physically relax. He started going to therapy, actual therapy, not the pretend kind where you just manage your stress better. But Victoria didn't soften. She didn't have a redemptive moment where she admitted her wrongs and everyone hugged it out like a sitcom episode. Instead, she became harder. Colder. She stopped pretending to be sick or fragile. She stopped making excuses. She simply accepted that she'd been exposed and adjusted her behavior accordingly, which, as it turned out, meant a lot of icy silences and pointed comments and a carefully maintained distance from most of the family. She came to our wedding 3 months later. I almost asked Marcus not to invite her, but he insisted. She's still my mother, he said. And she still needs to face what she did, even if that means sitting in a church watching me marry you while knowing that you're the one who exposed her. She sat in the third row, perfectly composed, wearing an expensive dress that she definitely couldn't afford. She cried a little during the vows, whether it was genuine emotion or performance, I'll never know. She came to the reception, smiled for photos, and gave a toast that was technically appropriate but delivered with the warmth of a weather report. And then she left early, citing a headache. What I didn't expect was the aftermath of that. The way Marcus struggled, not with anger, but with grief. Because exposing your mother as a liar and a manipulator doesn't make her less your mother. It just makes her a complicated version of the person you thought she was. It means recontextualizing decades of memories, wondering which moments were genuine and which were performance. Did she ever actually love me? He asked one night, lying in bed in our new house, staring at the ceiling. Or was it all just part of the image? I don't think those things are mutually exclusive, I said carefully. She can love you and still be a liar. People are complicated. That's what my therapist says too, he said with a weak smile. It doesn't really help, though. The prenup, ironically, never got signed. Marcus's father covered the legal fees to nullify Victoria's original request, and we got married with just a standard marriage license and a whole lot of hope. 3 years later, Victoria filed for divorce. The separation was acrimonious and public in exactly the way her bankruptcy had been private. It turns out that when your entire marriage is built on maintaining an image, the moment that image shatters, there's nothing left to hold it together. I don't know if she knows that I feel bad about that sometimes. Not guilty, I don't think we did anything wrong. But bad in the sense that watching someone's life implode, even when they brought it on themselves, is not as satisfying as you think it will be when you're planning the revenge. The hollow victory I felt that night on the patio became more meaningful over time, though. Not because the victory changed, but because what we did with it did. Marcus and I used the prenup situation as a catalyst to build a life founded on honesty. We talk about money openly. We don't pretend. We don't hide. We ask for help when we need it. And slowly, carefully, Marcus rebuilt a relationship with his mother, not the one where he believed her lies, but a real one, based on actual acceptance of who she really was instead of who she pretended to be. She never apologized. Not really. But one day, about 5 years after the engagement party, she sent us a text message, congratulations on the promotion. It was small. It was technically polite. It was her way of saying that she was still here, still his mother, still part of the story. Sometimes that's all you get. Not redemption or apologies or grand gestures of contrition. Just the quiet acceptance that everyone is broken, and we're all just trying to figure out how to live with it. That, I think, is the real ending to this story.